it's Barbara's fault.
Of course it is.
I don't know.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ann Christensen, a licensed prayer practitioner at Light on the Mountains. And now it's time for us to take a deep breath and go within. I know that there is one universal spirit, one infinite intelligence, one divine presence, and one creative force. It is all one. We are all one. And it is part of each and every one of us. And it is love and joy and beauty. It is peace and harmony, order and balance, goodness, wisdom, intelligence, infinite abundance, and perfect health. And I know that all of this is everywhere within each and every one of us and within everything in the universe. And I am so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for this wonderful philosophy and for Light on the Mountains that helps us learn about this philosophy and live this philosophy. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for everyone who makes this place work, this community work. And I give special thanks for all our volunteers and for whoever is in the kitchen doing, I think it's Heidi. I think I saw her. And I give thanks for Max and for RL and the magnificent music and for the Leadership Council, my fellow practitioners, and for Reverend John and his always fascinating messages. Give thanks for all of this. And together we say, and so it is. Okay. Let's see. It's a little complicated today. The reading today is from a fascinating book that I've had for a while, but I just found it again when I was looking for something that might have something to do with Reverend John's blog. It's called Quantum Shift in the Global Brain, How the New Scientific Reality Can Change Us and Our World by Ervin Laszlo. This man is amazing. I didn't know anything about him until I got into this yesterday. And louder?
Talk louder.
Talk louder, okay. He's 90 years old. He wrote his last book. He wrote 83 books, the last one in 2020. 2020. So he's amazing. So I'm going to read little pieces of what I found very interesting and applicable to us. It starts with, change is no longer mere theory. It is no longer merely an option. It is a reality, an imperative of our survival. Proceeding on the assumption of business as usual is suicidal. We have a whole range of new and sophisticated technologies at our disposal, and radically new insights are emerging at the cutting edges of the sciences. However, the key insight coming from the new paradigm in the sciences is not technological. It is the confirmation of something people have always felt but could not give a rational explanation for: our close connection to each other and to the cosmos. Traditional people have known of it and have lived it, but modern civilization has first neglected and then denied it. Yet genuine spiritual experience offers direct evidence of our links to each other and to all creation, and now science confirms the validity of such intuitions. Until the last few decades, scientists and science-minded people considered the feeling of human and human nature interconnection a mere delusion. Then the evidence started to come in, a fresh look at our connections in the framework of the new sciences, quantum physics above all, began to indicate that the oneness, in quotes, the oneness people sometimes experience is not delusory, and that the explanation of it is not beyond the ken of the sciences. As quanta and entire atoms and molecules can be instantly connected across space and time, so living organisms, especially the complex and supersensitive brain and nervous system of evolved organisms, can be instantly connected with other organisms, with nature, and with the cosmos as a whole. This is vitally important for admitting the intuition of connections to our everyday consciousness can inspire the solidarity we know so urgently need to live on this planet, to live in harmony with each other and with nature. There's one other little piece back here. I guess I have time for this. We need the timely spread of transpersonal consciousness to bring about a shift in civilization. This was recognized in 1991 by Václav Havel, then president of Czechoslovakia. In his address to a joint session of the U.S. Congress, he said, "Without a global revolution in the sphere of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better, and the catastrophe towards which this world is headed, the ecological, social, demographic, or general breakdown of civilization, will be unavoidable." Havel's point was well taken, but it's not a reason for despair. Human consciousness can evolve. At the innovative frontiers of society, it is already evolving. This could empower the shift to a new civilization, a civilization of holos. The quantum shift in the global brain is humanity's best chance. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. Nothing else ever has." Small groups of people with an evolved consciousness will change the world if they grow into a critical mass in time. There could not be a nobler or more important task in our day than to empower this evolution. And I wanted to read what we teach that John had written in the blog, and it is here. And I think it shows that we may be part of this small group. What we teach: we believe that God is not an external personality, but a loving presence that resides in all things. We believe that all are equal with this presence, recognizing that this love is unconditional and non-judgmental. We believe in the universal law of cause and effect, or karma, that has us experience the consequences of our actions, not as a reward or punishment, but as a natural result of those actions. We believe that our thoughts and beliefs create our experience, and that by changing our minds, we truly change our lives. We believe in the power of prayer, not as a petition or supplication, but as an alignment with the power and presence of the divine that always says yes to that which we have the consciousness or belief to accept. We embrace Jesus of Nazareth as the great example as opposed to the great exception, knowing that his ministry was to teach us that our nature as humans is divine. We realize this divinity as we accept that all of us are sons and daughters of spirit. We believe that there is no one true religion, and that all spiritual paths lead to the same realization of oneness with the divine. And now it is time to read the affirmation for March, which is right here in red. And let's read it together. I answer yes to the deeper callings of my soul, which brings forth a clearer direction, purpose, and understanding. Thank you. And now it's time for wonderful music.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone. Good to see you all. So first I have a correction to make. Of course, I think Ann came up giggling anyway. I don't know what you were talking to her about, Barbara. But so I got really excited for half a second when Ann, you were thanking everyone. You said Heidi's in the kitchen. I thought, finally someone's making brunch. Didn't you, RL? Because that's where we go. We usually both, and usually by now it's, Heidi is our live stream tech, and that hookup stuff is in part of the kitchen. So no, if you're thinking, yeah, I could use a little, we do have cookies and coffee in the afterwards though. So you know, yeah, I know we're upgrading now. Yeah, it is funny. It's such a weird time in history. Like, what are we doing as a spiritual community, which is the larger topic for today? Like, is it safe to make coffee anymore? Should someone bring cookies? Should I bake a little something? And so we're now going back into, well, yeah, we can go into that room and have coffee and a cookie again. So we're going to do that today. So guess what? This year is actually a milestone year for us. So as a spiritual community, we legally incorporated in the state of Idaho on December 31st, 1987. Do the math. That's 35 years. I mean, that's pretty significant. Next week, I will have been here 20 years. And so I remember when I came here, Light in the Mountains existed for 15 years, so I've now been here longer than you were here before I came, if you're following me. I know, which is kind of mind-boggling. And also today is our, I know it sounds very businessy, our annual meeting, which is our genuflection to our bylaws and all that sort of thing. And it's a time that we cycle out board members, leadership council members, and bring a couple in. But it's more than that for me. To me, it's a time to take a little bit of inventory. But first of all, let me tell you about what my intention these last few years have been for our annual meeting. I can't tell you in how many other communities and the larger Center of Spiritual Living how the annual meeting was a time of great contention. You know, the villagers storming the castle with the pitchforks kind of thing. And I thought, I don't want that to happen here. And so I thought, well, why do some people think that the only time that they can speak their mind is on that one rarefied day a year, that you should be able to go to any of our board members, council members, and with a suggestion or like, what's going on here? And I think we've developed that I don't see any pitchforks here today, thank God. Maybe they're underneath the seats, I don't know. But I think it's more healthy. In fact, one spiritual community I was involved with in Los Angeles, that it would become so contentious that they actually had to hire a professional person who was Robert's Orders Rules, you know what I mean, kind of guy with a gavel. And I mean, I was sitting there, I remember it was like the first year I was part of that community, they were like gaveling people, like, stop it, stop it. You know, I don't think I want that. And we don't have that. So it's just, again, it's just doing our business. But again, it's time for me, personally, to look at where we are, especially after these last couple of years. Again, I'm not completely convinced we have left this Twilight Zone episode, but maybe we're at the tail end of it a little bit. I'd like to think so. And so it's a time of what I call both reflection and inflection. Two completely different words and mean completely different things. So reflection, so 35 years is a long time. Where was I 35 years ago? Where were any of us 35 years ago? We didn't have cell phones. Shocking to some of the younger people here. There was a time before cell phones. I think the closest we got was an Etch-a-Sketch, maybe, you know, because you've got like dials on it or something. But it is a time to not live in the past, but reflect. It's a time to reflect, well, where do we want to possibly be in the future? And where do we think we are now? I mean, I think that's always up for reevaluation and change, but what are we up to? And I like the idea of inflection point. It's different than reflection. In fact, I had to write this down. So first of all, it is a term from geometry. It says a point in a curve where change occurs. And out of the mathematical world, it's just a turning point of change. So nothing ever stays still. We're always at a point of change, whether we are willing to admit it or not. And again, part of what I've talked so much about the last 2 years, I think we are in a significant inflection point in the world. and it trickles down to everywhere. So today is, not that we shouldn't do it any other day, is a good day to think, well, what does this inflection point mean? Why are we here as a spiritual community? What is our work in the world? Why, after 35 years, I'm pretty clear that we're not done. I really believe that everything has a shelf life, and I don't think we've expired yet. But things do expire. And so what is our purpose, or how are we even slightly a purpose different than many other faith communities? And that's a good question. So many of us come into here, we all walk through the door today. Many of us were raised in, I guess you could say, more traditional religions. And they have a different purpose, and I'm not saying different, that ours is better, it's just different. So usually, often in a regular religion, like people have said to me in town, like Agnes, I don't know what you do up there, but I'm really glad you're in the community. We haven't burned anything down. We haven't had, animal sacrifices in the lawn or anything. So I think, well, I think we're glad you're here. But often religions look at what's next. That there is some sort of deity or otherness that has rules. And if you follow the rules correctly, there's a really good next available to you. If you don't follow the rules appropriately, you probably won't have air conditioning for eternity. So, and again, I'm not judging that or really I don't want to make light on that for people's beliefs, but we teach a spiritual philosophy that is more grounded in the present. Meaning, how can all of us, shift our lives right now, knowing that as we do, the future will have a way of taking care of itself. And then people will say, have said to me, and this is a quote, "Who's your Jesus?" Well, it's like, we don't have one. But there's this idea that you have to have a Messiah or a prophet or some big guru kind of person that is, spiritually enlightened, that we honor and emulate, and again can help us get a ticket to that experience after life. And we don't. We have what I call a founding philosopher, Ernest Holmes, that he's not a prophet or anything like that. But what's interesting, and to talk a little bit about him today as we're reviewing, he started his, I guess we'll call it ministry, 100 years ago. And basically, he was a student of world religions, and again, go back 100 years. How unique was that? I mean, we take for granted how, even before the internet, you go to the library and research just about everything. You really couldn't so much then. And his idea was, as we look at different spiritual paths and religions, what if we looked at their similarities instead of their differences? And what if there was something that he had in mind of an institute where people can come together and study the similarities? Instead of saying, well, no, I believe this. No, I believe that. No, this is different. Saying, well, how can we come together? And he started to formulate what we call the science of mind philosophy, which is one of unity. And one thing led to another, and we're more of a faith community rather than just an institute that is a teaching institute. But teaching is still a real, a grounding of what we do here and all our centers in the larger. So the thing is, though, there's no mandate for us to do this. I was raised in a religion that there was, that you really had to. And you had to go to a Sunday service. I mean, it was really required, or again, that non-air conditioning situation would come into play for you. I'm kind of glossing over it a little bit. And so why would we do this? Why wouldn't we just sleep in on a Sunday morning or any other time of the week rather than choose to do this? Why would we do this if it's not required? That's the question. And I believe that we do it because as we study this philosophy, that first, it is not only a way of changing our lives, but it is a way of starting a spiritual chain reaction that we can actually help change the world. And I think that's amazingly how our philosophy has evolved. It seemed at first that it really was more egotistical of, let's just change me. And use things like affirmations or spiritual laws and principles to just get my life together. I need a better career. I need more money. I need more fulfilling relationships. And we all, of course, need or want and deserve those things. But there's a lot more to that. And I think our maturing in this philosophy is realizing that there is. That I think as I look back, that whole analogy, if you're on a plane that's going down, you put your oxygen mask on your first and then you help someone else. It was almost like we put it on first and like, oh, let them fend for themselves. What's in their consciousness? Let them grab for their oxygen mask, sort of thing. That we realize that, this is about, yes, doing my own healing, but it is connected to world healing. And what is my responsibility there? It's interesting, this week I participated in Sarah Gorham's book discussion of I Am the Word, and I haven't read the whole book, just the first 73 pages, and what I liked about it is that so far at least, it's the science of mind philosophy, but with that upgrade. It's not just about you and getting yourself together. The upgrade is we are responsible for everything on a certain level. And that's what I appreciate about it. And especially today, you realize that I know some mornings think, well, I really would just like to stay in bed and put the covers over my head. And you can always have a day like that and be a little mini denial. But I think we're all realizing that that's not a really effective way to go. So what does it mean for us to be in spiritual community? I found this great quote from The Art of Being by Dennis Merritt Jones. And he says, so what is it that makes a community a spiritual one? In Eastern teaching, spiritual community is referred to as Sangha, a community of individuals dedicated to creating and sustaining an environment that nurtures and supports reverence, mindfulness, and spirituality as a lifestyle. Add the elements of playfulness and seva, which is service to others, and you have a true spiritual community. And this sounds great, but I was reading this, and he says, it's sustaining an environment that nurtures and supports reverence, mindfulness, and spirituality. So how do you even begin to define spirituality? As I've had any numbers of phone calls and emails over the last 2 years, I can assure you that there is a difference of opinion of what that means. And sometimes after those emails and phone calls, I'm like, if you were truly spiritual, we would be doing this. And then a completely opposite one. If we were truly spiritual, we would be doing that. And how do you've got these two different things. And I'm sure all of you in your careers and jobs through your life, you've had similar things where people, of course, they rightfully have their own opinion, and they share it with you, and it's completely different than the last person that walked in your office or wherever it is that you do your work. And so part of this, I realize, is that there is sometimes really no ultimate definition of what that is. To me, it is a genuine seeking for a deeper truth, knowing that as human beings, we may never come to a definitive answer. And in the science of mind philosophy, for me, it's knowing that there are spiritual principles that I seek to use, and knowing that how I use them and my approach to them will ever be changing, and that other people's approach already might be completely different than mine. But here's the thing that I appreciate most from Ernest Holmes in this philosophy that he helped form. He said that the science of mind philosophy is like a buffet. Take what you want, leave everything else behind. He says, try it out, What works, keep. What doesn't work, don't keep. But it's funny how especially when we come to religion and spirituality, that we think that somehow we have to be good little spirituality students and just suck it up and do it anyway. Like, weren't we all raised with, since we're talking about food, you have to eat stuff you don't like before you can eat stuff you do like. Isn't that true? And haven't you, there's not so much like in restaurants, even big, like there used to be lots of buffet kind of things, like Sir George's buffets and all that. There's really not so much anymore. And like an abundance of often not so good food. But anyways, didn't you, even with that idea that you had to eat bad stuff before good stuff, even when you really put it complete choice at like the buffet, like, I really better eat that canned spinach first before I go get the flan? I mean, didn't you, in part of you, just think that, no, I really have to line up for the bad stuff first and then get to the good stuff or it won't work somehow? But in this teaching, that's not so. If it doesn't set right with you, don't do it. And really focus on that which is really calling you in this philosophy or any other philosophy that you can kind of mix it up a bit. So let's just review a little bit today, since we're reflecting of what some of our core beliefs or ideas. And Anne read what we teach, was kind of encapsulates it a bit. So what I have found, though, with spiritual principles, it's always kind of like a good news, bad news sort of story. There's parts of it you like, and then there's parts you're like, oh, I didn't consider that. So let me go back to what Anne read earlier. We believe that God or Spirit is not an external personality, but a loving presence that resides in all things. And that we are all equal within this presence, recognizing that this love is unconditional and non-judgmental. It's a loving presence that resides in all things. So as we look around the room, we could say, yeah, even that person cut me off getting into the parking lot today, I can still see that the presence of the divine is within them. But in this crazy world we live right now, it's not easy to see it in all things, is it? It's not easy to see it in all people. And as we have taught various classes over the years, and I'm getting ready to teach the basic spiritual principles, there is one night of that class that we really focus on this concept that the presence of the divine exists at the cellular level in consciousness in all things. And of course, there's always the hand. What about this political figure? What about this person who is in jail for murdering something? How could the presence of the divine or God be in that? And we kind of revert to this idea that there's good and there's bad. Now, there's good and bad things that we do. There's positive things and negative things that we do that affect all. But we still get stuck in that if something is terrible in our experience, that the presence of the divine can't possibly be in that thing or that person. There has to be some possession by some terrible thing in them. And the difficult thing, and like I said, it's a good news, bad news, is to realize that the presence of the divine is in those situations and people just as much as, let's say, Mother Teresa or anyone else you admire or love or think has brought great presence to the world. And I know it's difficult. The thing is that we are beings of, our free will is complete. We can use our free will, that presence, creative presence of the divine within us, to do amazing things, and we can use it to do terrible things. Think of it like Play-Doh. You can make anything out of Play-Doh. You can make little figures. Or, as we did when I was children, we would grind it into the shag carpeting. And my parents didn't think that was a good thing. And if that shag carpeting is still in that house that I grew up in, the Play-Doh's still there. It is not, you say, well, yeah, that's not a good thing. So that's part of the deepening in our spirituality, to understand that. But here's what's really, I think, significant for today in the world where we are today. First of all, we are at an inflection point. We are at a time that I believe that change is happening very quickly and rapidly. We're making choices we're having the opportunity to make choices much more quickly than in the past. A few years ago in class, people would say, I just can't see it in this person. I just can't. This is a time that we can't use that excuse anymore. We just have to. It's like the grace period has done. It's like, okay, I still don't accept what they're doing, but I absolutely have to see the presence of the divine in them. And actually, that's the key. So if you, in a sense, take a situation and separate it from you, or a person and separate it from you as they're doing terrible things, and let's admit they're doing terrible things, what you are actually doing more than anything is separating yourself from the wholeness of all that there is. And that recognizing the presence and the divine in all things and all people is actually one of the next thing to talk about a bit, is a form of prayer, which is saying that I can't change you, but I could recognize that in spite of your behavior, the presence of the divine is still there. And if enough people are willing to do that, they might just have their own transformation. Like prayer, like I said, is an invitation. I can't change any of you. But if enough of us are in prayer seeing the presence of the divine in something, it is an invitation for that situation or person to see or intuit that energy and say, maybe it is time to do something different. So again, it's a fine line. You can't change, but you can make an invitation. That you can so surround that person or situation with the presence of love and the recognition of their wholeness, that there's a point that they might not be able to do anything but change and transform. That's the difficult thing. The prayer that I was raised up in was just, it's like, can I fill out my order form? Please, here, God, will you change that person or that thing? It's like we have a responsibility. What will change it, that if enough people see wholeness in Ukraine, it will change. I absolutely believe that. And it may seem counterintuitive, but it is so. And in fact, just a spiritual teacher that I listen to occasionally was talking about this week in a YouTube video, because everything's on YouTube. He said that prayer has a growing life to it. That we like to think, old prayer, again, here's my form, go do it. God, angels, whomever, guides. Now I'm going to go back to my life, and here I've sent it off to you. But prayer is an accumulative energy that we create together that grows in its effectiveness as we stay focused on it. That we are so convinced that change, wholeness, and healing is possible, that it can't help but grow and eventually happen in some form. So prayer is a great responsibility. It is what Ernest Holmes says, it's creating a spiritual chain reaction in the world. I think we're all familiar with that opposite chain reaction, where we can be so worried and sure that something terrible is going to happen that, guess what, it does. But our job in prayer and science of mind is not to deny things are happening that are terrible, but to know that something greater is inevitable if we energetically stay with that. So just those two things, that we teach here, I think are life-changing. And they're challenging. We always have to keep with it. The power and presence of the divine is in all things, and even the things that we find terrible. And that I can hold the high watch in prayer of knowing that transformation is inevitable, and to keep with it, and for us to join together with that. And so even though today in our meeting and things, we might talk a bit about possible activities and things that we will do in the future, which are great and fun, but it always comes back down to this. Why are we here? To see the presence of God in all things, and to take that to an affirmative prayer where we know that change is inevitable. So I just want to close today. I sent out an email this morning with an opportunity for prayer today. I'm very excited about this. So I'm just going to read this. This is from Reverend Natalie Beth Liguri. She's spiritual leader for Center Spiritual Living in Geneva, Switzerland. She says, I invite everyone in the entire organization in participation in a 10-minute meditation today meaning today. And it will be at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. It will be led by Anastasia. She is a powerful practitioner living in Ukraine, living outside of Kiev. With this connection, there is the power in each individual in this movement to create peace now. So if you get our emails, I sent one out this morning with the link that would have for you people to watch at home. But if you go lower is the link to this. So just kind of think this a little bit. It is these terrible things like in the Ukraine seem so far off, and they geographically are. So one of our prayer practitioners in Ukraine is going to lead a meditation. She's there now. She's not like in Poland. She's in Ukraine, near Kyiv, the center where things are happening, where we're having trouble seeing the presence of the divine, where we're having trouble seeing that there is healing as possible. And she decided to stay there and pray with us. I think that's pretty amazing. So if you don't get our emails, let me know, and I'll make sure that you'll get the link if you would like to do that today. And for people at home, you can email us at office@lightonthemountains.org, and I will make sure you get the link. I think it's something powerful that we can do as a spiritual community. And further, this quote from Dennis Merritt Jones, he talks about being in SIVA or service, and we'll think of that as just signing the sign-up sheet. Give me the clipboard, and I'll bring some cookies or something like that. And that is service, but service is how are you showing up in the world? How are you committed to, in a sense, something like this, to be in prayer, to see wholeness where there is no appearance of wholeness? To me, that is the ultimate of service and SIVA. And that is what I think, beyond anything else we do here in the Wood River Valley, that we're called to do as a spiritual community. So let's just take this in and pray a bit. So in this consciousness of prayer, let us see our communities, our family, the world, and in spite of physical appearances, we know that the presence of the divine is in each situation, person, and thing. The presence of the divine is no less in one spot than it is in anywhere else. And we know that it is in our recognition that it exists where it appears not to that helps it manifest and be seen. So we put our human opinions aside and know that the presence of Spirit is everywhere. And we know that in this, that we begin to create a spiritual chain reaction where we see the greater wholeness and healing available right now. Even in places where we had previously convinced ourselves that it is not possible. We know that that is the work of our community, and that is the work of each of us as individual consciousnesses, to see perfection where it appears not to be. That is truly our only job. And so in this, we give thanks. We give thanks for this being so, even if we can't see it yet. But we know it is so. And we simply just release this idea, this concept. We release, we let it go, and we just let it do its work. In the heart and mind of spirit, in the greater energy of this thing we call the universe, we let it be done. And so it is.